You're listening to the Cam Books podcast with your hosts, Cameron and Trisha McManus. Welcome to Canto 31. We're getting through this.
Yes, indeed. We're nearing the end now. Home stretch. So this canto is a transition. The next canto will be in the 9th circle of hell proper. Our Dante daily is Pride is Weakness. Now, before we dive into this one, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to encounter giants, lots of giants in this canto. So I feel that in order for us to get something out of this, it might be helpful to know, okay, what exactly did the medievals think giants were? Like, they believed in them, what's going on, where does this come from? So I'm going to start by reading a passage from Genesis. This passage is the origin of the medieval belief that there are such things as giants. If you read this in a modern Bible translation, the word that older translations translate as giants is often left untranslated, Nephilim. But here is the relevant passage.
Great, so like Goliath?
Or
different?
Well, this is the tricky thing, is that there is some dispute as to whether giant is a correct translation of the Hebrew word Nephilim. That's why some of the... It's a really weird passage, so do buckle up. So it goes this way. And after that, men began to be multiplied on the earth, and daughters were born to them. The sons of God, seeing the daughters of men, that they were fair, took to themselves wives, of all of which they chose. And God said, My spirit shall not remain in man forever, because he is flesh, and his days shall be 120 years. Now giants, or Nephilim, were upon the earth in those days. For after the sons of God went in to the daughters of men, and they brought forth children, these are the mighty men of old, men of renown. So it's a very strange passage that seems to describe the sons of God, whatever they are, having children with human women and then producing these
giant people.
Yeah, and I will say giant it's not the only possible translation of Nephilim.
They make it sound like a demigod.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed, something like that. And indeed, that is what the passage says, that the mighty, renowned men of old are these people. Okay, so there were two schools of thought in medieval times on what this passage meant. The nice thing is that they are in agreement on the point that will be relevant for our Dante daily, and that is that they did believe that these things were human beings without any real qualification. So the two camps were this. Camp 1, and this is where we get St. Thomas Aquinas and also St. Augustine. They believed that the phrase sons of God and daughters of men really referred to the sons of Seth, sort of, the godly sons, the ones actually, following the law, and then the daughters of Cain. So in their reading, this does not describe any supernatural event as such. It simply describes one branch of the human family getting together with another branch of the human family, and the resulting offspring. If they're called giants, they might see it in the same way that we would say towering figures of history. What's really being referred to is their enormous impact or pride or whatever else. Okay. Camp 2 held that the sons of God mentioned here are fallen angels, and that it is sort of what it sounds like. They produce these sort of children with human women. Now, a modern reader will say, okay, so yeah, demigods, kind of like, hybrid human-demon offspring and so forth. But here's where things get tricky. In pre-modern and especially medieval philosophy, that sort of thing isn't possible. You can't really be 50% human and 50% something else. You are either 100% human or you are not human. So their understanding of and also the other difficulty is that angels don't have bodies. So how exactly would this go on? So the way they explained this was that although demons do not have bodies, they might make bodies for the purpose of doing this sort of thing. And it's plausible they also might get the, shall we say, necessary genetic material to reproduce babies and simply move it in there at the appropriate time, even though they are not themselves in these bodies in any real sense. They're just, something that they make or using or whatever else. So their reading of this is that essentially what happened is indeed what happened, but that the resulting offspring were not human-demon hybrids, but they were sort of designer babies, if you like, with the demons, I guess, picking the necessary genetic material to get these things. Of course, pre-modernists don't talk about genes and so forth, but that's largely how to understand their account. Now, I think that when modern readers hear this, we tend to be like, okay, so Aquinas and Augustine, they're very comfortably modern. They didn't believe in crazy things like giants and stuff like that. Hilariously or disturbingly, depending on how you put it there, in the very passage where St. Augustine says that he doesn't think that this describes any demonic human contact, he also says, however, there's such widespread reports of fauns and incubi or succubi that it would be folly to doubt that this occurs. He says, nevertheless, this particular passage is not referring to that. So the thing is that, just so you can kind of get the pre-modern mindset, Aquinas and Augustine, they don't object to this on the ground that giants, what a silly idea. They object to it on the grounds that the sons of God are described as experiencing desire for the daughters of men. And for them, that isn't compatible with their understanding of angels. So that is the only reason that they think there isn't...
They're ruling it out.
Because the thing is, demons don't have feelings, so they can't desire human bodies in this way. That doesn't really quite work. And that's why, when you actually read Augustine, he thinks, well, there's lots of reports, legends, and also apparently eyewitness sightings of things like this. We have people who get, convicted of witchcraft who claim to have done this. So it seems like it happens. He just doesn't think that it happened here. That is his takeaway.
Interesting.
Yes. Now, for our purposes, the main takeaway is that both of these camps did agree that giants are human. Whatever they were human beings. They might have been very large. They might merely have been very prideful or genetically impressive, but they were not half-humans. That idea isn't coherent in medieval philosophy at all.
So for our purposes, these are very tall, large people.
Yes, that's the way to approach them.
Got it. One and the self-same tongue first wounded me, so that it tinged the one cheek and the other, and then held out to me the medicine. Thus do I hear that once Achilles' spear, his and his father's, used to be the cause first of a sad and then a gracious boon.
As you recall, at the end of the previous canto, Virgil both scolded but then also comforted Dante in response to his too much attention to the bickering. So Dante likens this to Achilles' spear, which, according to legend, could, function like an actual spear, but also had the ability to heal wounds that it touched.
We turned our backs upon the wretched valley, upon the bank that girds it round about, going across it without any speech. There it was less than night, and less than day, so that my sight went little in advance. But I could hear the blare of a loud horn, so loud would have made each thunder faint, which, counter to it following its way, mine eyes directed wholly to one place. After the dolorous discomfiture, when Charlemagne the holy empire lost. So terribly Orlando sounded not.
So while they're walking, Dante hears a very loud horn, and he compares it to the horn of Roland, Oliphant. Roland is how English speakers will know this character if they know him. There's a very famous medieval poem called The Song of Roland. G.K. Chesterton was a big fan of it, but in Italian it's called Orlando. So the poem is basically about Charlemagne's, one of his great knights, Roland, is betrayed by one of their number, and his rear guard gets attacked while they're heading out to battle, and Roland horribly dies, and it's all very tragic, and so forth, but he blows this horn to get Charlemagne's attention. Now, the plot reason for this is just to indicate that the horn Dante hears is extremely loud, far louder than this famous horn from history.
Short while my head turned thitherward I held, when many lofty towers I seemed to see, whereat I, Master, say, what town is this? And he to me, because thou peerest forth athwart the darkness at too great a distance, it happens that thou errest in thy fancy. Well shalt thou see, if thou arrivest there, how much the sense deceives itself by distance. Therefore, a little faster spur thee on. Then tenderly he took me by the hand, and said, before we farther have advanced, that the reality may seem to thee less strange, know that these are not towers, but giants, and they are all in the well around the bank. from navel downward, one and all of them.
So Dante, peering into the distance, sees what he thinks is a heavily fortified town. He's actually going to compare it to Monte Regione, an Italian town surrounded by towers, in a few lines. What Virgil tells him after a while, what he's really seeing are giants. They are giants standing in what he calls a well, sort of up to the waist. What you're seeing is the surface of them. So this is important because this canto is kind of a transition canto. We're about to enter the 9th circle of hell, and I don't think this spoils anything too much. That is the circle of treachery. So we're moving from fraud to treachery. The giants bridge this gap, so it's kind of ambiguous. Are they there because of fraud, or are they there because of treachery? Well, kind of both, because half of them is in one circle and half of them is in the other circle. Their punishment, nevertheless, is a bit unique, so I find it easiest for readers to kind of understand it as just its own thing, rather than trying to fit it into one of those two camps.
As, when the fog is vanishing away, little by little doth the sight refigure. Whate'er the mist that crowds the air conceals, so, piercing through the dense and darksome air, more and more near approaching toward the verge, my error fled, and fear came over me, because as on its circular parapets, Monte Regione crowns itself with towers, and thus margin which surrounds the well, with one half of their bodies turreted. The horrible giants whom Jove menaces, and now from out the heavens when he thunders, and I of one already saw the face, shoulders and breast, and great part of the belly, and down along his sides both of the arms. Certainly nature, when she left the making of animals like these, did well indeed, by taking such executors from Mars. And if of elephants and whales she doth not, repent her, whosoever looketh subtly, more just and more discreet will hold her for it. For where the argument of intellect is added unto evil will and power, no rampart can the people make against it.
All right, here we have an interesting sort of philosophical reflection that Dante throws in about the giants. He says, nature did well to stop making creatures like this. And then he refers to elephants and other large creatures. He's saying the problem is not so much the size. The problem was the size joined to a rational intellect. Because when you have that, when you have a rational animal that is this enormously physically powerful, then there's really nothing that regular people can do against it. It's sort of an unstoppable force. It's very interesting to read Dante here. You'll recall our little discussion before this started as to what the giants were. So among the theologians proper, in both of these camps, giants were human. That was really they were a particular type of human, but they were sort of rational animals, not some other new species. Dante seems to sort of talk about them as though they're not quite human, that they are some other sort of rational animal thing. In doing so, he's not altogether on theologically, philosophically solid ground, but he's not unusual either. If any of you are interested in learning a bit about this, C.S. Lewis actually wrote a medieval textbook called The Discarded Image, which goes into the attempts of some to kind of reconcile fairies and fauns and nymphs and, even leprechaun type things into the medieval worldview. So Dante seems to see them as sort of like another rational species, but the rational part is what is going to be relevant for us. Because these are rational animals and they are not demons, their fate is very relevant to us. The fact that they're really big does not mean, these are just kind of demons. Dante does see them as free beings that can sin or not sin according to their choice.
His face appeared to me as long and large as is at Rome the pine cone of St. Peter's, and in proportion were the other bones, so that the margin which an apron was down from the middle showed so much of him above it, that to reach up to his hair, 3 Frieslanders in vain had vaunted them.
All right, when in doubt on any of these descriptions, assume that Dante is simply trying to indicate that the giant is very big. That's really all that's going on here. So the Frieslanders are famous for their height. So that line, 3 Frieslanders in vain had vaunted them, what he means is that if you took 3 of these guys and sort of stacked them on top of each other, that still wouldn't come even close, because then he indicates the 30 great palms of him down from the place where his mantle buckles. He's indicating even the guy's torso is already well beyond any imagining, and I'm not even seeing the whole guy. So the dizzying, astonishing size of the giants is the effect Dante's trying to create with all this poetry.
For I beheld 30 great palms of him, down from the place where man his mantle buckles. Raphael my Amek Izabi Almi began to clamor the ferocious mouth, to which were not befitting sweeter psalms. And unto him my guide, soul idiotic, keep to thy horn and vent thyself with that, when wrath or other passions touches thee. Search round thy neck, and thou wilt find the belt which keeps it fastened, O bewildered soul, and see it, where it bars thy mighty breast. Then said to me, he doth himself accuse, this one is Nimrod, by whose evil thought one language in the world is not still used. Here let us leave him, and not speak in vain, for even such to him is every language, as his to others, which to none is known.
All right. Nimrod is the central character of this canto, so we're going to have to say a little bit about him. So first, who is he from Scripture, and then also who is he here? So Nimrod appears in the book of Genesis. He's described as a stout hunter before the Lord. That's the expression used. And he's said to have built the city of Babylon along with many other cities. So readers are probably familiar with the story of the Tower of Babel, and probably could pick up that Dante seems to be saying that Nimrod built the Tower of Babel. Now, the actual Genesis account of the Tower of Babel does not mention Nimrod. The reason for the connection is the quite defensible, I would say, idea that Babel is Babylon. So if Babel is Babylon, then Nimrod built the Tower of Babel, because he's said to have built Babylon in the Old Testament. Now, is he described as a giant? Well, no, not exactly. But it's neither is it totally out there to take this stout hunter phrase and think of him as one of these Nephilim, one of these giants or whatever else. So the basic idea is that Nimrod here really embodies the spirit of the Tower of Babel. Now, if you don't remember this Bible story, briefly what happens is that the whole world is of one language, and what is decided is that they're going to build a tower that reaches unto the heavens. And the idea is that the tower will be sort of like a monument to our own magnificence. So God, when he sees us doing this, he goes down and confuses our language, and then the story kind of explains why it is that we speak different languages. Now, Nimrod himself has a really interesting eternal fate. He speaks truly his own unique, independent language. Now, if what you're after is pride, this will initially seem like the best possible thing. I once had a professor trying to explain to us the idea of tradition in Catholicism, and to get us to understand it at a deeper level, he said, well, think about language. This is actually one of the most basic traditions that you have. You really can't think without tradition, because, of course, how do you learn the meanings of all of the words you use, right? It's a tradition. It's not merely something we've invented. The meaning of the word good and book and boy and dog, these go back generations and generations and generations, just handed on. So to learn to speak a language, you have to accept a tradition. You have to accept something that exists before you. You can't merely decide what the word is going to mean. So there's a certain humility necessary, really, to speak a language. And I will say, speaking as an English teacher, if you want to write really well, you do need a lot of humility in this very specific sense. You have to kind of learn about your language the way that a sculptor has to learn about marble, right? You're not going to be able to just sit there and say, well, I want the marble to be like this, and so therefore it is. No, you need to learn how marble works in order to shape it into something beautiful. And the same is definitely true, I would say, of the English language, and I suspect true for other languages. But of course, if you're prideful, why would you want to accept something that other people invented when you could invent your own thing? So Nimrod, that's what he's chosen for all eternity. He's truly independent. He really has decided for himself his own language, what his words are going to mean. And that sounds great. But again, the Dante Daily, pride is weakness. This seemingly bold break from the pathetic mass of men to make my own unique language. Well, your own unique language is useless because you need other people to understand what you mean. And in order to get other people to understand what you mean, you have to take at least a little step back from your pride. You have to at least care what they think. You have to at least care how they think. You have to try to understand things from their perspective. And all of this is totally alien to pride. So this is very much the idea that we'll see running throughout this. These giants seem to be extremely powerful. They seem in their pride to, they're after independence. They're after not needing to be dependent on anything. And yet their rebellions actually are what make them unfree. Note, too, that Virgil indicates for Nimrod, he's got that big horn that he was blowing on, that in fact the strap of the horn is what's holding him in place. So this thing that he uses to make a lot of noise is literally binding him. It's actually part of his kind of shackles. So that's very much the theme Dante's going to get at here. Pride is chosen because we want to be independent from God, but it's really weakness. We are less, we are weaker when we embrace pride.
Therefore, a longer journey did we make, turned to the left, and a crossbow shot oft we found another far more fierce and large. In binding him, who might the master be, I cannot say, but he had pinioned close behind the right arm and in front the other, with chains that held him so begirt about from the neck down, that on the part uncovered it wound itself as far as the fifth gyre go. This proud one wished to make experiment of his own power against the supreme Jove, my leader said, whence he is such a guerdon. Ephialtes is his name. He showed great prowess. What time the giants terrified the gods, the arm he wielded nevermore he moves. And I to him, if possible, I should wish that of the measureless Briareus, the eyes of mine might have experience. Whence he replied, Thou shalt behold Antaeus, close by here, who can speak and is unbound, who at the bottom of all crimes shall place us. Much farther yon is he whom thou wouldst see, and he is bound and fashioned like to this one, save that he seems in aspect more ferocious.
Okay, so who are these giants? We've just met three. They're all from classical mythology, not from the Bible. So Ephialtes rebelled against the gods of Olympus and tried to scale Mount Olympus by piling mountains on top of each other. It's interesting, and this is something we've seen Dante already do. He treats defiance against Zeus actually as defiance against the one true God, essentially because that's what they took to be the king of the gods. Briareus is actually not someone Dante sees, but he's a giant who famously has 100 hands. That's why Dante wants to see him. Virgil indicates that he's too far away from here. He's here somewhere, but we're not going to see him. The last of the giants mentioned is important. Antaeus is a giant who famously fought Hercules. His gimmick, so to speak, was that while he was connected to the earth, so while he's touching the ground, he's invincible. So to kill him, Hercules had to pick him up and crush him in his arms. That's important because Antaeus, as we'll see, is the freest of the giants, not very free, precisely perhaps because of this connection to the earth. That incidentally is the literal meaning of humility, to be low to the earth.
There never was an earthquake of such might, that it could shake a tower so violently. As Ephialtes suddenly shook himself, then was I more afraid of death than ever. For nothing more was needful than the fear, if I had not beheld the manacles. Then we proceeded farther in advance, and to Antaeus came, who, full 5 ells, without the head forth issued from the cavern. O thou who in the valley fortunate, with Scipio, the air of glory made, when Hannibal turned back with all his hosts. Once brought'st 1,000 lions for thy prey, and who hadst thou been at the mighty war? Among thy brothers, some it seems still think the sons of earth the victory would have gained. Place us below, nor be disdainful of it. There where the cold doth lock Cocytus up, make us not go to Titus, nor to Phaeus. This one can give of that which here is longed for. Therefore stoop down, and not curl thy lip. Still in the world can he restore thy fame, because he lives, and still expects long life. If to go itself grace, call him not untimely.
So Virgil begins with this kind of half-flattering speech to Antaeus. You're very great, your history is known very well. Indeed, it's said that if you had joined your brother giants in opposing Mount Olympus, that, the Titans probably would have won. All this kind of stuff. And then he indicates that you should help bring us down because Dante is still alive and he can actually restore your fame above ground. Now, all of this will sound very familiar to us. We've seen it's a big theme in Dante. Do the souls in hell want people to know about them or do they not? We've kind of seen both attitudes so far. This will be very important in our next canto because we're going to see that one distinctive feature of being in the ninth circle properly is you do not want people usually to know who you are. That's going to be Dante's first experience of the place. I don't want anybody to know I'm here. I don't care about what's going on up there anymore. So Antaeus does apparently to some extent care about his reputation. And this is actually not encouraging, he's in hell, but it's something good. He still at least cares a little bit about something that's real. He's not so prideful that he totally disdains what all other people think. So that's one thing he's got going for him, so to speak.
So said the master, and in haste the other, his hands extended and took up my guide, whose hands great pressure Hercules once felt. Virgilius, when he felt himself embraced, said unto me, Draw nigh, that I may take thee. Then of himself and me one bundle made, as seems the Carcidina, to behold beneath the leaning side, when goes a cloud above it, so that the opposite it hangs. Such did Antaeus seem to me, who stood watching to see him stoop, and then it was I could have wished to go some other way. But lightly the abyss which swallows up Judas with Lucifer, he put us down, nor thus bowed downward made he their delay, but as a mast does in a ship uprose. And there we have it.
There we do. So again, the Dante daily is pride is weakness. I think I first want to talk about another way in which, because this is a very medieval idea, it's not Dante's own altogether, and then we'll talk about how it applies to our own lives. So if you like medieval art that features devils, one really hilarious feature that you'll sometimes see is the frequency with which demons are depicted as having eyes on their butts. And I mean, this is really common. It's not like, oh yeah, there's a couple of fun paintings like this. Yeah. That's a visual way, I think, of getting across the same idea that Dante is trying to show here. So in this, we have giants who are incredibly physically powerful men who've, rejected God and their pride because they want to do it all on their own by their own strength. But they're just chained up. They can't do anything. In rejecting God, they're far less free than Dante, even though he, compared to them, is the size of a flea. Well, similarly, the idea is that if you look at the butt eyes in any of these paintings, there's a really famous one, actually, of the devil with the Saint Augustine that is worth looking at, but we'll probably post it on Instagram for people to look at. So it seems initially like, oh yeah, that's like more power, right? If you have more eyes, you can see more. So it would seem, in a certain sense, to be an arguable, improvement on the regular angel in art, who's just like a man with wings kind of thing. But of course, this ostensible improvement actually just makes you look ridiculous, right? Like there's whatever benefit you get from being able to see out of there is far outweighed by just the sheer lack of dignity and so forth.
It actually makes me think of cars these days, how there's a backup camera. So I mean that's
Yes. Installed a backup camera.
We're installed with backup camera. Okay, so
that could be a meme. The original backup camera.
Is there a reason for it? I almost feel like there's a benefit to having, they say I've got eyes at the back of my head, but instead of on the head, it's on the bum. Like what is the benefit, or what makes it so ridiculous?
Yeah, I mean, it looks funny, like when you see it. I think the point that the artists are making is that there is a real sense in which, like, yes, this is something that the demon has that the good angel doesn't have, right?
Okay, wait, so you're saying this originated from the artist? It wasn't written somewhere and then the artist...
No, there's nothing in scripture about demons having eyes on their butts.
So somewhere along the line, medieval artists took the liberty to say, you know what, we're going to identify these demons as having eyes on their butts. Okay.
So yeah, now this is just my own reading of this visual detail, but you see this idea that pride seems like I'm getting an extra advantage, I'm getting an extra strength that those goody two-shoes don't have, but in reality, I am actually losing something far greater and maybe even actually making myself weaker, or at least, less impressive or ridiculous. So the idea, I think, that runs through medieval art is this. So angels are presented visually as, beautiful looking men with wings and weapons and so forth. And demons are presented as kind of modified versions of that, right? So it's as though they've made edits to God's original design in order to rebel more against him. Now, many of these edits, if we want to call it that, are just, the same sort of thing, but corrupted. So, bat wings instead of bird wings and that sort of thing. But this eyes on the bum thing is really common. And again, it's really funny. Like when you see it in art, like your initial response is to laugh. It looks ridiculous. And that really is a very common medieval thought about them. And I think the point...
I do notice that, in this art, it's often drawn very beautifully and elegantly. And then when it comes to the demons or devils... They look a little more cartoony, like more silly looking. Like they almost don't belong. Like someone might have just drawn over it, to vandalize. Yeah,
so I think that's kind of what they're going for. Because as you know, right, okay, eyes of the butt, that's a backup camera, right? You can... and we want to note here, the artists are not trying to write their own theology. They're trying to tell a story with pictures, right? But it corresponds to something like you can see why an angel might choose to be independent from God, because that would seem to make you more powerful than the ones that choose to conform their will to God.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
I am not an art buff. I don't know things, but when we've gone to the Met or the cloisters and seen this art, when I see it, I've also seen it also like in the stomach or the groin area or other parts of the body.
Yeah.
And I thought of it as, and tell me if you think this is crazy, but as it's being its own being. The way they serve themselves. They're serving lust. They're serving just whatever they feel in the moment. And so, not to be crude, but that maybe that's what they're trying to depict when they put, it's like its own master, so to speak, that their other bodily parts are also decision makers.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely very much the idea, right? Because that's the whole idea of what a demon is, right? I'm being independent, I'm rejecting, and so forth.
Yeah, they're not logical. They're very much, I serve whatever part of me wants to lead right now, and that's what I do.
Yeah, and of course the artist who's not writing a theology essay is then visually making a point that the theologians will make too, that this very independence is actually weakness, is ugliness, is awful. Like there's something in it that's like, my gosh, don't you see what you did to yourself? Don't you see what you fell from here? Now the theology behind that is that, for example, and some people don't know this, so certainly it's true, for example, that they say that Lucifer is the highest of the angels. So what that means is that in terms of his, I'm going to speak, kind of casually here, his natural gifts, he was the highest of the angels.
Or the worst.
Well, no.
worst of
Well, the
angels,
worst. Well,
or-
what they mean when they say that Lucifer
naturally
before
talented. Okay, gotcha,
that
gotcha.
before he fell, he was gifted with
Got
more.
it. Got it. Okay.
Whatever it is angels have, he had more of it than any other. But he rejects God, chooses to essentially worship himself. And fascinatingly, I forget where exactly I read this, but it's pretty standard Catholic theology that this actually makes him weaker than even the lowest of the good angels.
Because he had pride?
Well, because the thing is that even the lowest good angel, although he might have less, whatever you want to call it, natural abilities than Satan, he has God. Right? He has God on his side. So the good angels do not merely use their own power to oppose the demons. They use their power plus the unlimited power of God. I mean, we even say that in the St. Michael prayer, right? By the power of God, cast into hell. So that's the situation. Lucifer is this incredible mind, all that sort of thing, all these great natural gifts, but also is weaker than all of our guardian angels, also weaker than a first century, Jewish teenager kind of thing, right? I mean, that's Mama Mary there and so forth, right? Like the actual end result of this is that he's just completely... It's not even a contest. He's not got a chance against even the lowest saint in heaven, never mind the angels and so forth. So similarly, this is what's going on with these giants. They're terrifying. Dante, when he hears one of them move, he feels like he's going to die, but then says, oh, but I didn't because, of course, I could see the chains, right? They have all this power, but they aren't free. They can't do anything with it because in opposing God... well, what do? They're just stuck in hell, and they do basically nothing for all eternity. The only one that does anything is the least prideful of these giants, Antaeus, who is at least willing to, ironically, serve God in hell. He's the only one who can move.
So it's like saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, the higher you are, the further you have to fall. Mm-hmm. The more honor you have, the more responsibility and... talent, and the higher you should be, so you should be more onerous of the gifts that you've been given, and when you squander that, you have so much more to answer about.
Oh yeah, and this is very much, I mean, to go back, actually, this is a principle of St. Augustine's, actually, where he says that basically the corruption of the best is the worst. And what he means by that is that, like, the ugliest things are actually the things that were formerly beautiful and then marred. C.S. Lewis puts it this way, where he says that, a bad man is much worse than a bad dog for the simple reason that a man is so much better than a dog. And I forget where I read this, but this is even true when it comes to, like, humor. Like, the reason that cats are so funny whenever they, like, slip on something or whatever, is precisely because cats kind of carry themselves with a bit of dignity.
Pridefully.
It's not really funny. It's not as funny to see, like, a squirrel slipping on ice as opposed to a cat.
Yeah.
Because cats, they're so cool and collected. A squirrel is just kind of like a mouse with a fluffy tail. Like, you're not expecting much in the first place.
Okay, so remind me again the title.
Pride is weakness.
Pride is weakness.
So this we should now probably bring, I suppose, to our own normal human-sized lives and not, 7. How does this apply when you're not 800 feet tall?
Right.
I think it applies to this. We are, like Adam and Eve, always tempted to see sin as some kind of shortcut. Like, yeah, you shouldn't do it. Oh, but if you did do it, you would advance yourself so much. And what we need to understand is that really pride and sin altogether is weakness. If we reject God's help in the long run, and I mean, speaking from personal experience, very frequently in the short run, we disadvantage ourselves. So whatever apparent advantage that we're going to get from being willing to sin, we don't really get, because when we're willing to sin, we cut ourselves off from God's help. And that is far more important, far more practical than any of our own human cleverness or anything else. So to put this kind of... I'll give a boring, but I think ordinary example. Okay, suppose you work in business, and you might think to yourself, well, I could conduct my business honestly, but if I do that, I'm going to be at a disadvantage, because the other guys out there who conduct business dishonestly, well, they can do everything I can do, right, because they can do all the honest stuff, but they also can do the dishonest stuff, so they have more tactical tools at their disposal. So naturally in being good, I'm going to disadvantage myself. So surely maybe I need to, maybe not be quite as awful as them, but, maybe I need to indulge in a little bit of wheeling and dealing or something like this. Now, from an earthly perspective, that makes sense. But if your financial future even is actually, part of God's plan for you, I would really not advise anyone to try to throw off God's help. And I don't work in big business, but I think this applies to really any kind of area of life where you're trying to get ahead. If you really ought to get ahead, you want God's help. And if you have God's help, that's going to matter far more than any of our own kind of ideas.
It's interesting. I was just thinking as you were saying it about the importance of integrating your faith into your work life, the responsibilities that you have more so than just outside of your church and in your home and in your work and in your friendships. And I'm sure by the time this comes out, we'll already be preparing for our interview with Mr. Mark Edelson.
Oh, yes.
And who wrote the book, How to Live an Integrated Life. And it's interesting. What you're saying is if we're integrating it into our faith lives, that because we are Catholics, because we are Christians, all the more we have to live honestly, and that we have to watch out for pride because it is weakness, and that although we need to have a holy pride, to take pride in the things that we are given, to take pride in the Mass, to take pride in our faith, but in doing that, we have to be also very careful with how we present ourselves to the rest of the world. What does that look like? Well, I'm thinking about how we need to do our work well, how we need to be honest in our dealings with people, how we need to be genuine when we compliment, and charitable when we offer corrections or advice. And that we just have to be like Christ, essentially. So when we are prideful of that to where it cuts charity, that's so much worse than for someone who is not trying to pursue a Christian life. Yeah?
Yeah, no, yeah, I think you're exactly right on that. I mean, I was thinking as you said this too, because I was trying to come up, okay, has this ever applied to my own life? Now, I'm not the type to get involved in, I don't know what you call like interoffice politics in the first place. But I mean, as a teacher, I've worked in a few different institutions, and teachers have egos, people have ideas. And one thing that I've really carried through life is that I take very seriously Aquinas' idea that you can't lie. You can not say stuff, but you can't say actual lies. And when I first tried to really practice this, it was difficult because I was like, oh my gosh, there's so many even just like simple, like annoying conversations now that I can't avoid because I'm not allowed to just for example, pretend that
blurt it all out.
I'm not allowed to say that like, yes, I'm already working on that thing that you sent me or whatever. I'm just like, oh, to be totally honest, I haven't got to it yet and that sort of thing. But then once I started practicing it in personal life, but also in professional life, I found actually that I would end up, and I can't give specific examples without, necessarily, I found that I would actually end up frequently avoiding problematic dramas and issues that would arise for other people in the workplace because, they would have some interaction with the person like, oh gosh, what am I supposed to say now? Because, they're kind of going behind my back on these things. And I found that if your only options in the workplace are to tell the truth or say nothing, it does simplify things. And like weirdly, it almost always works out when you just do one of those two things. And especially when you are known to be someone who will always do only one of those two things. A lot of people don't want to touch you in their weird passive-aggressive schemes to, take someone else down at the meeting. So like, the problem is he'll just tell, because they'll know, it's like he'll just tell people exactly what I told him. He won't pretend I said something else.
Yes.
So
it's very clean. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think I'm right in attributing it to this because I'll often find like, we just had this horrible, awful this whole web of insanity. And I seem to frequently just fly through it. Maybe because people think I'm a simpleton, but that's, not such a bad thing.
It's also, I think people have a way of overcomplicating their own relationships. Mm-hmm. And it makes me think of in The Godfather, where the Godfather is essentially telling Sonny off after he speaks his mind in front of the people who are asking for money. And he says, that dirty drug money, blah, blah, blah. I don't want anything to do with it. The people leave, and the Godfather just gives Sonny, hell for what you never say. What does he say?
Yeah, it's never tell anyone outside of the family what you're thinking, right?
Yeah. I think that's prudent.
Yeah. I was just thinking, actually, that, back before I really embraced Aquinas's thought on this, and really Christian thought on this, when I would lie, it was not really strategic. It was kind of like, I was just kind of like throwing it out there. Ironically, when you insist on I will not lie, you do pay a lot more attention to what you say and what you don't say. But very frequently, just the option of just not saying something
frees you.
Well, it really, when I was used to telling what you might call little white lies, it just didn't occur to me sometimes to just say nothing. And sometimes that is frequently the most prudent thing to do. And it's something that Sonny, who certainly is willing to lie in the film, lacks in that, right? Because he's kind of not got control over his tongue, right? That's really his difficulty there.
Well, obviously we're talking about not saying anything, especially when you're not asked.
Yes.
Right? But if you're asked, that you're going to say something that is still in line with the truth without having to reveal how much you probably don't like this or that policy or politics.
Well, of course, I think now...
It's just not necessary. It's just, I think maybe just we really need to practice saying what's necessary. I know I need to. I really, I see some people at work who are really good at that. And it's almost like you want to shake the tree. Like, come on, say something.
Yeah, give me a little more.
I want to know where you're at. But, they more often than not, it's because they actually haven't really thought about it. But I think it is a good thing to put into practice of letting the thought come first in your mind, say it in your head, and if it passes the filter,
yes, then get it out there.
Then you can put it out there. But sometimes my mind is working faster than, or my mouth is working faster than my mind.
Well, especially with our kids, this is definitely something that I need to do with them more often. That I'll sometimes just say oh yeah, and then you're like, don't tell them that, and then they're like,
that's not age appropriate.
Or sometimes it'll just be something ridiculous, I'll say it, and then of course the predictable response will be like, but I want to have donuts. Why did you even mention the possibility that we were going to have donuts now that we passed the donut shop kind of thing?
Well, the nice thing here in a marriage is we have each other.
We do, yes.
To approve or to disapprove the thing that we're about to then share with the children. And that is something we need to utilize more. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We've somehow departed, I think, from pride is weakness. But
maybe not altogether, though, because the thing is that what we're really talking about here is pride in the sense of, sure, you've got to live a moral life, but sometimes when the chips are down, you have to just put some of those rules aside and just do stuff. That's really what we're talking about, right? When you say no, even if it will cause me a problem, I'm going to not sin. Ironically, sometimes you would actually have had more problems, even in the short run, by engaging in the sin. There's one example, now it's a war example, and it's from centuries ago, but I think it might be worth noting here. So, and this comes from actually a internet argument I got into, it wasn't all that heated, with someone about, he'd mentioned the one of the King Henrys at Agincourt, and essentially I'm going to bungle it slightly, but what happened was that a bunch of the English were at war with the French, and a bunch of the French soldiers had surrendered. But it was not advantageous or tactically practical for the English to take them all prisoners. They'd easily escape. They just didn't have the resources to take that many prisoners, so instead they just killed them all. It's an awful atrocity, but it's often debated by war historians, but they kind of had to, because otherwise they would have disadvantaged themselves. And then what I pointed out in this argument...
They had to.
Yes. Yeah. Well, what I pointed out in this argument is that, because the person I was speaking to was a fellow, believer in God...
Can I take a guess? Mm-hmm. That they lost their bargaining chips by killing their prisoners.
Something even, actually, perhaps a little more chilling.
Oh.
I don't have the exact years right. About very few years after this event is the birthday of Saint Joan of Arc.
Oh, wow.
Who, as you will recall, is the means by which God enters this war on the side of the French, and then all of these very practical, real politic generals get themselves completely humiliated by a teenage French peasant.
Right.
And that's really the point. Like, apparently people still study the tactics Joan used, because it was, of course, the whole point is that she was not a tactical military genius. No. She was doing what the saints were telling her to do. And that's the point, right? That at the end of the day, when you cut yourself off from God's help, you lose no matter how smart you are.
Got it. That reminds me of the movie The Lady. Michelle Yeoh plays Aung San Suu Kyi, or Kyi, I can't remember how you say it. But basically, the true story is her father was the opponent to basically the communist regime, and they killed him, which then made him a martyr. And then his daughter was very little when that happened, and then eventually she became the leader of Burma. So they put themselves in a position where, yeah, they may have killed the inconvenient person who was opposing them, but birthed a much greater problem for them down the road. And I think we do the same when we take an easy route, like you were saying earlier, lying. Well, it reminds me, and I've said this before on this podcast, a lie leads to another lie, leads to another lie, leads to another lie. And we need to be careful, because what's the point? What is the purpose of someone lying? More often than not, it's because they're trying to save face in one way or another. They're trying to avoid trouble in one way or another, but without even realizing it, in the blink of an eye, with that little lie, you've created a much bigger problem. And as that becomes a habit, that's a massive problem.
Oh, yes, no, absolutely. And I mean, the irony, too, is that, of course, if the point is to save your reputation, very rapidly you get the reputation of being a liar. Yeah. Once you make a habit of doing these things, people do find out.
I never slept with that woman.
Oh, God.
I automatically think of Bill Clinton, like, But I mean, the minute, tells the truth, you're going to have that sting. Think of Hamilton, that musical Alexander Hamilton. Well, he lied, he cheated on his wife, and then what did he do? He outed himself by writing a letter to everyone saying exactly what happened, and regained his popularity. But that taint will always be there. Yeah. He was capable of lying. Well, we all are capable of lying. But if you're examining your conscience at this moment and you find that, I tell a few white lies, or I omit the truth, this is different. There's a fine line between saying nothing in the workplace regarding politics or whatever it is that you were talking about, like not adding more information than necessary, and omitting the truth. That we need to be thoughtful of, what is the detriment here to my soul? What am I trading in order to stay popular, or trading to stay quote unquote safe?
Indeed. I think too, this is something that I say to the kids a lot, that, when we talk about the judgment day, right? So one of the things that will happen at the end of the world is that every choice that everyone has ever made will be known. And I have to say, our son, he takes this seriously. I've tried to make him take this seriously, but he will now, repeating Daddy's things, say, "Oh, well, I guess we'll know on the judgment day if that person was telling the truth or not." And he's right. That's the point, right? So the short term cover is going to ultimately be, people will know for all eternity that you lied, for every little lie. Yeah.
And I'm ending on this note because I love it. It's one of my favorite things, is that whenever we, in our marriage, in our private lives, and we'll just share with you now because it's hilarious, I think, is sometimes we'll do something funny. We love to do accents.
Yes.
And there are some accents that are harsher than others. And we learned from a previous boss of yours that when he's done that in public, he's not married. He just kind of blurts out what you will. he regrets what he does, and he automatically goes, that'll be played back.
This is true enough.
It doesn't leave you.
Oh, yes, indeed.
So can you live with it for eternity? That should be your thought.
That should. All right.
Before I do this, before I say this, can I live with that for eternity?
Thanks for listening to the Cam Books podcast. Follow us on Instagram at Cam Books.